email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Jeanet Wade, expert EOS implementer, business coach, speaker, and author of the Amazon #1 bestseller, The Human Team. We resumed the conversation with a discussion of human connection. Now, I love the opening quote to the connection chapter by Robin Sharma. The business of business is relationships, and the business of life is human connection.
Yep.
And there are layers here as well, like connect to core values, connect to place, connect to culture. So I thought that was a really great way to open that chapter.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about connection at this point, and there's so many things with connection, right? I mean, but without connection, we're othered, we're dysfunctional, we don't belong. I mean, all those things do happen. But one of the things I've been finding, especially, so the book came out in 2021, but it was really written pre and during COVID. But when I first did connection through the research and the discovery, it really was that there's a lot to it, but there's some interesting nuances. And one of them I found is our connection to place is super important. That we connect through geography and ritual quite often as human beings. And so the geography thing became a challenge with COVID. So many people working remote felt disconnected. Their energy was getting drained because they didn't feel like part of the team anymore. So you can actually trick your eye, you can trick your mind around connection if everyone at the company shares a common background to their Zoom meeting. So if you take pictures of their office and make those their background, this literally happened in an online meeting I was in. I had them change their backgrounds to their office background. If they were in office, what would it look like? So someone went and took pictures of all their places, sent it to them. They all put it in. The owner of the company happened to be in the building that day, the actual physical building. And he was on the Zoom call and he's like, "Are you all here with me? This is so awesome." Like his sense of connection showed up. Like, this feels like we're together. I love this. And I wish we could actually be in the same room, but I know you're here with me. Like, he knew they were there with him. We tricked his eye. He didn't know we had done that. And so it just proved that, our connection to place is important. It centers us that I work there. When we started going remote, now the Great Resignation is coming. I think it's because we're not connected as much. Like, I don't really work there. I work at my home and I could work anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not as connected. It's not the only reason people are leaving. They also want to feel valued. But I think there was a disconnect and they realized, well, I could plug in anywhere. I don't really feel connected there. And the organizations that maintain high connection through happy hours, through activity, through virtual backgrounds being consistent, they ended up having higher levels of retention and connection and engagement during all of this and continue to have it. The other one is ritual, connection to ritual, the consistency of habit. When that got broken, people were like, well, I don't know if anyone's talking to anyone. And I don't know if this, when they created either new rituals that were consistent. So every day we get together for 10 minutes and we say hi on Zoom. Right? The companies that did that had high levels of connection with their employees, even if it was just to say hi. The ones that continued the rituals that they had before, the regular meetings, the regular approaches and things that they would say, anything that was common and consistent for them, if they kept it up, it maintained connection on the team. So I think ritual and geography are an interesting thing with connection, not just the conversation and collaboration and things that can happen, but the actual understanding how human beings really connect to things.
I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting because I kind of looked at Zoom and Teams and all these as better than nothing, but not, because one of the ways we connect as human beings, at least subconsciously, is eyeball to eyeball, right? And so right now,
yeah,
you think I'm looking at you, but I'm actually looking at the camera and I really can't see you. And I got to look down here to see you. So it's hard to make that eyeball to eyeball connection that you feel in a room together face to face. But I do think that's really pretty cool the way you describe the office backgrounds and how that really, I hadn't thought about that. That's a great idea.
Even if it's the same color with your logo, it helps.
Right. Now, when it comes to connection, let's say I'm brand new at a company and one of the things we need to get is culture. What do they look like when the doors are closed, right? What is the culture truly? Mm-hmm. And how do I grow as an individual inside of a company? The way we do it in the past is I'm in an office with 10 different people and one of them naturally becomes my mentor and I can see how they operate. And we're kind of not seeing that, right, virtually. So how can I make that connection on that level? Is there anything we can do to replace it virtually?
For me, connection and so for virtual remote work, connection works the same as it does in person. You just have to put more time and attention into it. So you have to do it more often is one thing. Where in the office, you didn't have to necessarily see me as much. On remote, in order to maintain connection, you have to increase the frequency at least a little bit. You need to be purposeful about not just jumping into the meeting and getting to the heart of the project and actually stopping to say, hey, a real human being show up. Let's check in, see how you're doing. Right? Let's, I know it feels fluffy, Clint, but can you tell me how you're really doing today? Or asking some great questions about, so what was the one thing you really loved as a child? I've had people do show and tell to get to know each other better, just to laugh. Specialized happy hours or lunch and learns where you actually ship the same thing to everybody. This is another trick for connection. If you want to have a Zoom happy hour or a lunch, ship them all the same thing to eat or the same thing to drink.
Okay.
And they all raise the same glass. There's this sense of, it's like almost like team gear, right? You're wearing the same thing. You're doing the same thing. You're eating the same thing. Because we connect through experiences. And I'm sure you would agree, great conversations and great connection happen best when you are eating, drinking, or walking, or doing some activity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not over the conference room table or over the Zoom meeting.
Not generally, no.
Yeah. So if we can recreate eating, drinking, socializing, and activity on the virtual environment, we actually strengthen the connection.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that the purposefulness and the intentional is important because you're not going to serendipitously run into somebody on a Zoom call, right? That you will in the hallway in real life, you might. So you do have to be more purposeful and say, I need to make sure I schedule time with this person to get to know who they are and ask them to be my mentor.
Yeah, funny story. So to maintain connection, one of the pet peeves in the office for one of my clients was that one of their colleagues was notorious for burning popcorn. And because they loved burnt popcorn, that was their favorite kind of popcorn. So they would burn popcorn. Of course, if you've been in an office with burnt popcorn, it lingers and it smells and most people hate it. They actually, in a way, a little bit missed it. I mean, it was kind of a funny joke. They sent burnt popcorn to everybody. Someone popped it, they shipped it. And they're like, just in case you're missing Joe. And it made them feel like they all laughed about it. They're like, oh, things you wouldn't have thought you would have missed from being together. But we miss Joe's burnt popcorn. Like, it's those quirky things when family members die, right? They're like, man, it was irritating when they were alive, but I sure miss it now.
Meanwhile, the FedEx driver hates you. Everybody who handled the package hates you. That's awesome.
But connection creates loyalty, right? So we need to be bonded to the team. And so a huge retention strategy now, or even an attraction strategy, connected teams are keeping their players. And the ones who are connected are attracting team players because you want to be on that team.
Right.
Right. So they're not experiencing the great resignation. All those people leaving are going somewhere.
Right.
And they're going to great teams.
Yeah, I think one of the things that concerns me personally is if it's somebody just coming out of school now and this is their first job and they've actually never physically met any of their coworkers. And it is hard to get that sense of feeling like you're part of we have the same logo on our shirts and all that, but I haven't talked to you, I haven't run in the hallway and said, hey, what happened with your son this weekend? How's the football? Whatever those things are, right? We have a connection on a different level. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be definitely harder for people that have come up in this COVID environment where everything is forced to be virtual to really not be able to make those connections.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of reconnection to do when we get back into physical space. There was a little bit of re-entry issue in this past year for some companies, like the readjustment to being around people. And I don't know if you experienced that, going back into a restaurant or bumping into people. It's a little bit irritable. It's like, oh, why are they over talking? Or, people were so excited to be together. It was almost irritating. And I think there's a re-entry connection that has to happen. You need to really plan for that, not just throw them all back in the office together.
Yeah. I think you're right. This reintroduction process is going to be a bit iffy at first, I think.
Yeah.
Now, you also shared a human needs centric getting to know you exercise called 3-2-1. What's the purpose and how does it work?
The purpose is to get you deeper into, so when you know someone, you tend to like them. And when you like them, you trust them, right? You connect to them. And when you share, the 3 events that most impacted you, the people that most impacted you, your biggest struggle or fear, those types of things, people will relate to you. So when I share, these events have happened to me, you're like, wow, I had something similar happen. Suddenly we're bonded. Or I'm the oldest of 4 kids, or, I'm the only one who can do that strange activity too, right? So all of a sudden you're like, we have things in common. I like you, like internally. You don't consciously maybe think about it, but you're like, wow, I didn't know you were like that. I kind of like you. And when you like them, you trust them.
Right.
So we need to get to know people is the fundamental to connect, right? We need to actually get to the reality of who they really are and find the common bonds that we have, because we will build higher levels of trust and engagement with them.
And you have a process called 3-2-1. So how does that work?
So sharing the 3 events that most impacted you, the 2 people that most impacted you, and the one thing that most, you're most fearful of or challenges you, allows us to get a much more vulnerable view of you. And I always say, don't share the events and people that would be marriage and birth, because that's a gimme.
Or it should be.
I guess those impact you, but like share some real stuff, like if it's the death of someone important, or this person was the game changer in my life, or, this is something that really I'm most fearful of. Those types of things allow me to see the real you, not just the superficial, like I'm married with 3 kids, right? I mean, those are great to know. I think you should share personal histories as well, in addition, but for teams that want to get to a deeper level of vulnerability, they need to share really deeper things.
Right. One of the challenges we have in projects, we do a lot of global projects. And so there's this pre-pandemic and hopefully post-pandemic, we actually bring people together for 3 days to plan. And the reason we do that is to have these face-to-face sessions is because of what you just talked about. Even if we haven't done it in the formal way of 3-2-1, it's about learning who you are, what about you do I resonate with, learning about how many kids you have, what your kids are doing. My kids are doing the same things. We have that in common. It really establishes a connection on a different level that we can then go back to our respective countries and spend the next 12 months apart and be successful. Because we're collaborating on a different level, which I think is important.
Exactly.
As I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of work on projects, and I actually teach classes on project management. And one of the questions that comes up every time is, how do you handle sandbaggers or bad team members? And I think it's an interesting question because either I'm the luckiest man on the planet, or these other people have just had some really bad luck. The truth is that in my 30 plus years of doing this, I maybe run across 1 or 2 truly bad team members. I think most people, when they come to work in the morning, they don't say, what's the least amount of work I can do today and get paid? I think most people come to work wanting to leave at the end of the day, feeling some sense of accomplishment, right? Yeah. And your third C was really about contribution, which seems to validate my thinking on that.
Yeah, most people want to contribute. I have not seen, to your point, anyone who's taken a job said, man, I hope tomorrow, my first day in the job, I don't get to contribute. If anything, they're fearful that they're wondering, will I be able to do a good job? And did I make the right decision, right? They have the apprehension, but the further they get into the team, sometimes we don't allow them to contribute. We hold them back. So they start distracting us because they try to find ways to contribute that aren't really contributing. So they're actively seeking to contribute to fill that need in themselves. And we're like, but that's not what I really need from you. Again, going back to clarity, we didn't give them the clarity. They distract the team because they start chasing shiny objects and other activities, or they detract from it because they are those, the people who don't really fit in and are toxic to the team, right? So the 2 versions of that, people who are bad on the team, we'll just call it that, bad people, bad people on a team. The first version is the majority of them, which is, I'll just call it fixable. I don't like fixing people, but it's fixable. It's navigatable. It's the fact that we need to just confront the root issue of it as a team and not keep hiding from it. We need to say, this is what's happening, not attack them, not take it personally, but say, when this happens, this is what happens on the team. What can we really do to fix it? Or what's really causing it? Why do you feel that way? Why are these behaviors showing up? And a lot of times it's because they'll say, I didn't know my role and I figured I would do this, or you guys aren't doing what I want you to do. We don't have clarity. They'll start getting into these 6 facets of human needs a lot of times as the root issue. And so we get to the base of it and they end up saying, I can commit to the team in this way or that way, or we just aired our grievances. We cleared the air for each other and we were able to solve it because we finally talked about it. Sometimes we just got to talk.
Right.
Like, you can't keep avoiding it. You can't keep avoiding them. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding going back to the lack of clarity and confusion. They interpreted something you said, or you interpreted something they said, and their personality is more gruff than yours, so you took it personally. And really, if you can rise above all the personality, we are on the same mission together. Those people are recoverable and can realign. The ones who can't, the narcissists, for example, the jerk egomaniac, those ones are typically not recoverable. And great leaders and managers know when to remove them from the recipe of the team. They do fit in on some teams. I mean, there are highly aggressive teams that those people are highly valued and they all get along and they don't take anything personally. But there are some highly empathetic, sensitive teams where that particular person in the room derails everybody and it's an emotional nightmare.
Yeah, I've known two of those narcissist people and they offend me on just a different level. It makes me crazy. And I'm an empathetic person. So I make myself deal with them, but I can't wait to leave the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, there's no fixing it. There's no navigating through it. You either accept it as a team, you remove it, which is the best option because they're just not right for the team. They're right for another team. So you remove it. And the other option would have been to change it, but you really can't change them. Right. So if you can't accept it, you must remove it. And I think that's the only way around it. Too often we wait too long to remove it and fooling ourselves into thinking we can change it or fix it. And we wait years. And when it finally does remove itself, typically, we are so thankful. And why didn't we do that sooner? Everyone says it. I wish we had done that sooner. This was the right thing for the team. We are so much better now. And we've leveled up as a team. Yeah. Why do we wait so long? Because we fooled ourselves into thinking we could fix it.
Right. This is maybe more about clarity than contribution, but there are two stories that come to mind. You have the one story about the co-founders who kind of grew apart. And then once one person left, the team really, to your term, leveled up. And then the other story that I liked was the leader who you notice that people didn't know what to do. And he said, I'm doing that on purpose.
Yeah.
And how that was just so eye-opening. Like, why would you? Well, I want them to rise to the challenge. I want them to, figure it out. And I want to know who the superstars are. And you're like, they could be superstars if you gave them a little direction, right? So
yeah, it is interesting. We think we can make them contribute. We can make them accountable, whatever approach they might take. But contribution requires really understanding the human being you have in front of you and what they naturally can bring to the table so they can fully contribute. Of course, it requires clarity and connection first. And it also requires us to have the right team size. Human beings contribute based on the size of the team. So collaborative trust would be 3 to 7 people. It's a high trust, high contribution, high collaboration level at 3 to 7. 15 was the Dunbar number. When I said size matters, right? 15 is when empathy breaks. So empathetic trust breaks at 15. Meaning we start to faction and fraction when the team gets too big. People stop caring about the meeting so they don't participate or contribute. Because the team's so big, you can hide or you don't have to. And then cultural growth and relationship trust starts to become fragile at 150.
Okay.
So that's the relational number. So we need to just realize the size of team and what the purpose of the team is so that they can truly contribute fully. But too often we invite people to teams because we feel we have to. We don't want to hurt their feelings. And we waste their time and our time, and then we don't get full contribution.
Yeah, you negatively impact the dynamics of the team.
Yeah.
In the contribution section, you also talked about this importance of a charter. And so that piqued my curiosity because we use the word charter too. But in your world, what is the charter and why is it important?
I would call it, it's kind of the team's guiding principles or constitution. And so I just walked a team through this week. This particular team has a highly sensitive culture. They worry a lot. There's a lot more crying than normal. There's a lot of emotion. They're just a more sensitive culture. And it matches their core values and what they do in the world. There's a reason that culture's there. But people get their feelings hurt way too easily and they stop contributing. Fine, I'll just go along to get along. I don't want to make anyone upset, so we just won't go there. They won't have healthy conflict, right? So they stop contributing, they stop pushing, they don't go there. So we did the team charter to help them outline really what are going to be our top 10 ground rules for doing tough stuff. How are we going to be a team that is really highly functional and what does that look like? And they had a few statements on there like, anytime I talk to you, I'm going to assume best intentions. And so if anyone's not assuming best intentions, we're going to use that phrase of saying, hold on, it feels like we're not assuming best intentions here. Am I clear in that? One of them said, if I want to bring up something tough, I'm going to say, the story I have in my head is that you really don't want to do this or that this is happening. So that it became not, why are you doing this? But more like, it feels like, and I'm thinking that this is what's happening. It diffuses it for them. It's not going to be confrontational and aggressive. It makes it an approachable, oh, you're about to say something tough to me trigger, right? So they set up these ways of talking, engaging, and ground rules that are going to allow them to function as a team and give them a place to point. And many of them printed it out and put it behind in their padfolio that they carry with them so that they can go, hold on, we said number 8 we would do. Are we still committed to that as a team? They're like, oh yeah, let's go there. Let's go back there. We're going to have the tough conversation. You're right. Right. So kind of breaking their reactions by having a team charter.
Talk about the clients you work with. What does that engagement look like or feel like? You have the book, obviously, but then probably people need some coaching to help them implement this. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, my primary role in the world is expert EOS implementer. So it comes from another book called Traction by Gino Wickman, but I'm one of a little over 450 people in the world that do this with businesses that help them get traction on their vision with a healthy, cohesive team. Right. So I'm in full day offsite sessions with leadership teams at privately held companies every single day and helping them do tough decisions, solve real issues, stay accountable to each other, and really get momentum and traction on their vision as a team.
Now, you talked about it's worldwide. So do you find that the 6 C's hold up in all cultures?
So far. So far. And then I'm going to try and get some graduate students to kind of test out the research. Like I said, it's based in psychological principles, how to bridge the gap from nature. And so we're getting some MBA students and some PhD psychology students to kind of validate the work as well and maybe look at it as a diversity, cultural, does it translate? But human beings are human beings. So my hunch is, and so far it's proven that it's held true.
Well, I would say anecdotally, I've worked on projects around the globe for 30 years, and I think you're right. Everything that I read in the book, and we've only covered half of the 6 C's, and we're running out of time, but everything I read in the book resonated with me, and I've seen it work in Asian countries, in Latin American countries. I think the way you put it was correct. Humans are humans. And there are some cultural differences, but in general, we want the same things: to feel safe, to feel like we contribute, to feel like we're a part of a tribe. I don't think people are born a nomad, right? I think we want to be part of something. So,
yeah, and I think the cultural thing's interesting because I think you can solve it through clarity, the interpretation of how we see things, so even colors or how we shake hands all need to have clarity, right? Some cultures embrace touch, some do not. You need to have clarity on that. Otherwise, you will cross a boundary. You won't be connected. People will not contribute, but also it's the consideration of others, right? So they want to be considered. So understanding those cultural differences or diversity differences or any of those things are a human thing that need to be met for the team to function and actualize.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned very early in our conversation about how you define marketing or how you define terms, right? We were talking about clarity.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in Japan on different projects. And one of the things that I learned very quickly was when you're talking to them, they're looking at you and they're nodding and they're saying, hi, which means okay. And so to us in North America, that means you understand and you agree.
Yes.
But to them, that is not what it means. It just means I hear you. You're saying words. I understand them. I'm not saying I agree with them, but you got to figure that out, right? Because you don't know that at first. You just think hi means, okay, you're going to do it. And then it doesn't happen because they didn't really agree. And the other one is there's no word, it turns out, I spent 2 months there this summer in Japan. There's no word in the Japanese language for no.
Right.
So they don't want to tell you no, right? So what they do instead is they say, that will be difficult, which means it ain't never going to happen. They don't tell you that, right? So you have to understand all these little things you just didn't get, right? But at the end of the day, they want to contribute. They want to feel valued. They want to feel appreciated, and they want to be part of the tribe. It's just these other little things that everybody's not a cookie cutter for sure.
No, I mean, I have relatives. So part of my descent, multi-generations, is Mexican. And in that culture, very nice, very considerate. If you say, so would you like to come over for dinner? Oh, no. Like they don't want to put you out. It's a kindness thing. They really want to come over for dinner. And then you'll ask a second time, are you sure? Because we'd really love to have you. No. And then the third time they're like, well, okay, yeah. So you have to ask things 3 times in that culture to get to the yes, right? So it's an instant kind of hesitation, no, or kindness that happens until they get around to saying, well, if you're really okay with it, I would love to.
Right.
And so that clarity and the way we connect and that consideration of that culture, those 3 needs being met. Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to navigate humanity, and that's how you do it. Yeah.
One of my colleagues worked in Mexico for a few years at a textile plant. And he was trying to get something done, and he asked somebody to do it, and he was told mañana. And so the next day, it still wasn't done, and he asked again, and the guy says mañana. And this went on for like a week, and my colleague is getting frustrated, and finally somebody walked in and said, listen, mañana doesn't mean tomorrow. It just means not today.
Not today. Yeah. Another way of saying no.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. And as I said, we've only covered half of the 6 C's. So if someone wants to learn more about you and your work, how can they do that?
They can either go to thehumanteambook.com to find out more about the book, or they can go to business-alchemist.com, which is my website.
Okay. And so I love the title of your book, by the way. It's called The Human Team. And that subtitle is, So You Created a Team, but People Showed Up. So I think that's fantastic. It was a really great read. And I really have enjoyed our conversation today, Jeanet. Thanks for being on the conversation.
Same here, Clint. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.